Welcome to the Viking Age podcast. It's the official podcast of thevikingage.com. My name is Chris Schad. I write for the Viking Age as well as Bring Me the News, Zone Coverage, and the Brookings Register. And we do this every Monday and Thursday, or sometime later in the week. Might be Wednesday, sometime between Wednesday and Friday. We're like the cable guy or the guy coming to fix your internet, right? But wherever we do it right here on the Viking Age YouTube channel. We're also on Apple and Spotify the next day. So what you need to do, however you consume us, don't forget to rate, comment, like, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode. And we can continue to grow this community that's been checking us out over the past 2 years. Now, today's guest, he is a site expert for predominantly Orange and NFL Spin Zone, which you can find on the family of fan-sided websites. He is also the co-host of the Locked On Broncos podcast, and his name is Sayre Bedinger. Sayre, welcome to the show, man. Good to have you.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it and always look up to you guys over there at the Viking Age, setting the standard, for us at Fansided. So appreciate you guys and thanks for having me on.
My one article, my bold predictions every week, the driving force of the Viking Age. So I do what I can.
Yes, I love it. I love it.
So coming into this weekend's game, obviously you have a lot of experience with the Broncos. How are you feeling about this matchup between the Vikings and the Broncos? Because it's a matchup of two teams, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but both teams are very similar coming into the game.
They really are. Both teams on a streak. I was saying on Locked On Broncos throughout the week, somebody's streak is coming to an end, right? Obviously, this week is going to be sad for a team's fan base that, hey, we've been feeling really good. Things have been going really well, kind of caught some fire here, and now kind of have to deal with what next after, suffering a little bit of a setback. But I feel good about this matchup. I really do. I think anytime the Broncos and Vikings get together, it's always a big deal for me because I grew up in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, around a ton of Vikings fans, and so I had to deal with a lot of razzing through the years, but also had some opportunities to do some of my own as well. But it's always fun because so many of the people that I know and family, friends, people that I grew up with, they're Vikings fans. And so it's always just a fun little back and forth. And so I'm excited, though, specifically for this matchup because I watch plenty of the Vikings, always have, just because that was one of the only teams that was on when I was growing up. So I've watched a ton of Vikings and I keep up with them quite a bit. And especially with Josh Dobbs mania right now. I mean, I'm loving that storyline just from the outside looking in. Love what Josh Dobbs was doing with the Cardinals. I couldn't believe every week I'm watching the Cardinals hang with all these other teams. I'm like, what got into Josh Dobbs? You know what I'm saying? And so I was when Kirk Cousins injury news came in and the Vikings traded for Dobbs, I'm like, this team believes in what they've got going, and Kevin O'Connell, he believes in the way that he can coach them up and put Josh Dobbs in a position to succeed. I just couldn't believe the Vikings were really the only team that we know of that tried to get the guy.
Yeah, there were some rumors that the Browns were trying to reacquire him because in typical Browns fashions, they traded him to the Cardinals right before the season. And then they went, oh, Deshaun Watson's got a broken shoulder. We better go and try and get him back. And the Vikings were able to get it done for like nothing. I think that was the best part of the Josh Dobbs trade is that the Vikings, my biggest fear was like they're going to go give up like a first round pick for Ryan Tannehill or something. That's like a really extreme end of the spectrum. But I mean, that's what I feared. I feared that they were going to do something that would lock them in long term, get rid of that flexibility that they had with Kirk Cousins in a contract year, and go get Josh Dobbs. Now, some people, so I'm not going to name names, some people are saying, oh, he's just faking it. He did the same thing in Arizona, right? But I mean, his ability to come in, learn that offense, I think maybe I didn't know anybody's name. Maybe that's a little bit overblown, but I mean, at the same time, he's come in and stabilized and maybe even in some ways made this offense better than it was with Kirk Cousins, which was pretty damn good. But Dobbs, that added layer of mobility and everything else, it's a very exciting time to be a Vikings fan.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And especially when you can overcome injuries like that. And not only Kirk Cousins, but Justin Jefferson, obviously missing for the last handful of weeks. And so, yeah, the team is really galvanized. I got to go talk to Luke Braun, the host of Locked On Vikings. And I was telling him, like, from my seat, like I feel like this Vikings team is better than the one that only lost 4 games last year. And of course, I know there's, different pieces of the team, like better or worse, guys aren't healthy, things like that. But when they were full strength, even after that slow start to the season, I kind of felt like, man, they have the feel of a better team. They've got a better, I know they closed out a lot of one score games last year. Maybe, some of those opportunities, maybe the ball bounced your way a little more than it normally does. But at the same time, you just feel like this team is maybe a little bit more complete. And that adds to the intrigue of this week 11 matchup, right? It's like they're coming into Denver. They're really galvanizing around Dobbs, around each other. Kevin O'Connell's doing a great job coaching them up. But then you have the Denver Broncos, where kind of like a similar vibe is happening right now. Like early on, people are wondering, man, was Sean Payton in over his head? Like, did the Broncos even hire the right guy? And now it's like, oh my gosh, they definitely hired the right guy. Like, he's changing the culture and, the huge defensive turnaround. So it's pretty great to see both of these teams succeeding and making some noise, where I think right now, hey, if you're an NFC team, you don't really want to be playing the Vikings in December, January. If you're an AFC team, you probably don't really want to be playing the Denver Broncos right now. Just ask Buffalo, ask Kansas City. I mean, the Broncos are playing some good football right now, and so are the Vikings. So Sunday Night Football, I think a few weeks back, people were like, man, this is kind of an ugly looking matchup on paper. And now it's like, no, this is a really, really good game.
Well, and of course, a couple weeks ago, you were looking like, is this game going to get flexed? Like, I don't know
Yes,
about this game. Two teams that are competing for Caleb Williams and Drake May. And then, when the Jets and the Raiders can survive in that Sunday night time slot, I think the Vikings and the Broncos can do that as well.
true.
Let's get to talking about this matchup, though. Kickoff is 7:20 on NBC on Sunday night. Mike Tirico, Chris Collinsworth, and Melissa Stark will be on the call. The Broncos are favored by 2.5 points, according to the Action Network. The Vikings, of course, as we mentioned, 6-4. They are on a 5-game winning streak, and the Broncos are 4-5 on a 3-game winning streak. I want to dive into the Broncos a little bit because this is your forte, your wheelhouse, so to speak. What has been the biggest difference with this team that you've seen over the past 3 weeks?
Well, defensively, the turnaround is big. You want to be able to wash your hands clean of this, but I keep every week it comes up multiple times. The 70-point game against the Miami Dolphins. That's the obvious, elephant in the room, so to speak, of where this team was, and it's the most dramatic indicator based on where they are currently, which is over the last 4 weeks. I mean, one of the top defenses in the NFL, basically in every metric. When you look at points allowed, when you look at turnovers forced, yards allowed. I mean, they have been playing so well defensively that they're able to stay in games. And quite frankly, I mean, the offense has kind of been selling them short just a little bit. The Broncos forced 9 turnovers against Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes over the last 2 weeks combined, and that doesn't even include a couple of turnover on downs. The offense, I mean, only 24 points when you have 9 turnovers plus an additional couple of turnovers on downs. I mean, that's kind of crazy that they should be upwards in the high 30s or maybe low 40s in terms of points scored based on the opportunities that they're getting. But really, they're still in a discovery phase on both sides of the ball, I would say. But defensively, they've really turned it up. They're forcing a lot of turnovers, and that's the biggest difference that I would say over the last 3-4 weeks here, dating back to really a week 6 game on Thursday Night Football that they lost against Kansas City, where they gave up only 19 points. Kind of served as a turning point for this team to really feel like, okay, yes, we gave up 70 to the Dolphins, and yes, that was embarrassing, and yes, it was historically bad. But also, we just held Patrick Mahomes to 19 points, right? So, which identity are we going to accept as our reality going forward? And they really gravitated towards that defense, and they're playing complementary football. And offensively, the running game has really picked it up exceptionally well over the last handful of weeks. Javonte Williams looking very fresh. So, I think that's really the two biggest differences as compared to early on in the season.
When you give up 70 points, that's just something people don't seem to forget. Like I didn't even watch the game. I was at the Vikings Chargers game, and I remember, after several Coors Lights looking at the scoreboard being like, does that say 70? Like that can't be right. No, it was right. It was very right. But I will say the Broncos do have some things going for them, like you just mentioned. I mentioned, they're leaning on the run right now. I think their running game is kind of the foundation of the offense. They've had 34 attempts over the last 3 games, 21.5 over the last 6 games. I think it's like 78 total over the last 2 games against Kansas City and Buffalo. And you mentioned the turnovers too. They're a +8 turnover differential. They're also getting some of the like lucky bounces. Like last year, you mentioned this is probably a better Vikings team. I think part of it was because the Vikings did have some lucky bounces last year. They had Josh Allen fumbling in the end zone. They had, that Justin Jefferson catch before that. Just these insane things that never seemed to happen in the Vikings, and their luck ran out in the playoffs. The Broncos kind of had the same thing where, I think of James Cook trying to dribble the football like a basketball the entire game on Monday night, giving the ball back to the Broncos. I think about the extra man penalty on Will Lutz's game winner. Like that play was crazy, because I kind of want your opinion there, because I saw him take the knee and the clock's running, and it was like a fire drill call. And I'm like, guys, you have 15 seconds left. Let's everybody take a deep breath. Let's just kick the damn field goal and get it over with. Well, like they're like rushing out there. Will Lutz is like, screw it, let's go, and like just shanks it wide right, and you get saved by the flag. That was just kind of a bonkers sequence in my mind.
You're telling me, man. I mean, my gosh, I was sweating so hard at that point. I'm like, there's no way everything that just happened in this game just happened, and they're about to lose on a missed field goal when you've been gifted basically the entire field of field position. Yeah, it was brutal, but it was also a relief because you botched 2 extra points throughout the duration of the rest of the game and ended up almost losing by a point there. So instead of winning by a point, if you just make your extra points, then you a missed field goal away from. So it was really an emotional roller coaster. I know that's cliche to say, but it really was. I mean, like you said, they had some lucky bounces going their way in that game. And then late in the game, Justin Simmons pops the ball out of James Cook's hands again, and he dribbles it right back into his own stomach. So there's things like that you're like, oh my gosh, like just one more lucky bounce, right? But no, it's one of those games to where like, man, you do so many things right, and you also make a few mistakes. Like the Broncos are a team right now where their margin for error has kind of increased just a little bit because they're not turning the ball over a ton. They still commit a lot of penalties though, and they still have a pretty limited overall offense in terms of throwing the ball throughout the course of a game. So they've just built themselves a little bit more margin for error with the ball kind of bouncing their way a little bit, so to speak, especially against Buffalo. Now they kind of beat Kansas City handily, which I can confidently say because I watched 16 straight losses before that. They definitely beat Kansas City fair and square, but against Buffalo, you got a couple of breaks here and there. So it definitely doesn't feel like they're just kind of like backdooring their way into these victories. I think they did a great job against Green Bay, but they're still like capping themselves, right? And we all know this, over the course of a season, you don't get many perfect games, but the Broncos do feel like they have a little bit of ceiling on what they've been doing lately, and whether or not they break free from that, I think depends largely on Russell Wilson.
Yeah, and you kind of on Twitter or X, excuse me, a little bit, have defended Russell
Hey.
Wilson a little bit. Let me put this in Vikings terms, because like we have over in Minnesota, we have a highly paid quarterback entering his late 30s. Half the fan base loves him, half the fan base, I don't want to say hates him, but kind of like, can you do better than this? Like it's very polarizing. How does the Broncos fan base react to Russell Wilson? Because we're in year 2 here of that massive deal. And Russell Wilson, the Broncos offense just hasn't taken off to what they thought it would be when they made that trade.
Yeah, he's definitely been polarizing. There's no doubt about it. Maybe more so than any quarterback the Broncos have had since Peyton Manning. Obviously, Russell Wilson is a big name player. But as of last year, I think even the biggest optimists, myself included, were kind of in the camp of like, oh my gosh, like, is this the new reality? And I just simply said, I refuse to believe that a guy who was this good for 10 years, a guy who just crushed our own team in the Super Bowl, has now all of a sudden become this bad. I kind of felt like he would rebound a little bit, but this year it's really been hey, one section of Broncos fan is saying, well, Russell Wilson is first in touchdown percentage. He's number one in terms of red zone efficiency at the quarterback position, and he's number two in this, number one in this. But then you look at the remainder of the game and you're wondering, well, why is there not more of a consistent downfield or intermediate passing attack for the Broncos? Like, is Russell taking too many unnecessary sacks? Is he not seeing open receivers? Do the Broncos, have they not fully installed those basic concepts where you can throw those dig routes, or you can throw the double crossers in the, deep down the field? They just don't seem to have that clicking fully at this point. So that's where I think there's a disconnect between the fan base right now of, is Russell Wilson limiting the team? No, actually, Russell is making a lot of clutch plays. Russell is the reason why they were able to go get down into field goal range against Buffalo, and he's been the reason why they've excelled in the red zone. He's using his legs more this season than he did last year. He's healthy. He's making better decisions with the ball. There's so much good, and yet everybody wants those Madden numbers, right? Well, he's got to throw for 300 plus a game for me to really be comfortable with thinking that we're going to be able to win games. So I think definitely can resonate with where Vikings fans are at with Kirk Cousins. Though from the outside looking in, a lot of Broncos fans are like, man, if we had only signed Kirk Cousins back in 2018, can you imagine pairing him with this defense for the last handful of years? So it's always the devil you know versus the devil you don't, right? And that's how fandom is in all of sports, but especially in the NFL.
They're kind of intertwined. Even this season, you look at the two teams. I mean, if we did this show a month ago, you and I would be talking about, well, who's going to out tank who? Who's going to get Caleb
Right.
Williams and Drake? It's going to be 1 and 2 in the draft. Vikings and Broncos, baby. Actually, the Bears and Panthers would probably have to say something
True.
about, well, technically it would be the Bears saying something about that because they own the Panthers pick because they screwed up. Talk about the devil you don't know, Bryce Young. Not exactly a great
Right.
trade right now, but when the Vikings started 1 and 4, I was on the, hey, lean into this opportunity, go tank for a quarterback, maybe play some young guys, because you did have a highly paid quarterback like Russell Wilson who wasn't meeting expectations. They had a defense that was just making the wrong play at the wrong time, and most importantly, they couldn't hang on to the football. And when a team says, oh well, if we just fix this and this and this, like, we'll be fine. Well, usually they don't fix it. Like, usually it just kind of stays the same, even if it's like early in a year. Maybe you have a thing or two, but when you have a laundry list, it doesn't tend to change. The Vikings have fixed those things, though. I mean, the defense is getting better each and every week under Brian Flores. Last week was their first game without a turnover this season, and other offensive pieces are getting better without Justin Jefferson. Like, TJ Hawkinson has had more opportunities. His timing is back, even though he's like a crash test dummy on the field. Jordan Addison looks like the best receiver in this draft class after a lot of people had a lot of questions about his size and his speed and everything. He looks like a bona fide, not even like a number 2 receiver. I would say like a 1B receiver right now, along with Justin Jefferson. And oh yeah, you're going to get Justin Jefferson back perhaps as soon as Friday. He said the final decision will be up to him, however. Like, I look at the Broncos, and they are basically what I was afraid of the Vikings becoming when they were 1 and 4. A team that, they get a couple of nice wins. Like, oh, we beat the Chiefs. We beat the Chiefs. We beat the Bills. Like, we're starting to get going. And there's still a lot of issues. Like, one of the issues that I found, it was a piece in The Athletic where they mentioned they've had a pre-snap penalty on 3.2% of their offensive snaps. Mike McGlinchey is first in the NFL with Carolina's offensive tackle, Akeem Ikwanu, I think his name is. I apologize if I'm butchering the name. But I mean, 6 false starts. And like, this has the feel of something that Judd Zolgad, who runs Purple Daily, one of the co-hosts there, he calls it a furious rally, because it's just like, just when they're dead, they go, we'll show you we're a better team than we are. And next thing you know, you're picking like 20th in the draft. So I don't know. Is this an accurate assessment of the Broncos, or do you think they are for real, especially at this point in the AFC playoff picture?
It's a great question. I mean, to the point about the pre-snap penalties, like, that is a consistent problem. And that's what I was saying. Like, against Buffalo, you had the ball bouncing your way so often, and then the offense is getting the ball in great field position. All of a sudden, you're backing up, or you're getting knocked out of field goal range, or you're blowing an opportunity when you get close to the red zone because of unfortunately, I mean, I'm not saying I call him this, right? But I mean, he's earned the nickname McFlinchy from a lot of the fans, and deservedly so. I think that, you know what? Hey, if you're going to fall start like that, but look, it has been an issue, but it does feel like this is a much better team. This is a better team situationally. This is a better team in terms of, like I said, running the ball, creating turnovers. And when you're creating turnovers, getting opportunities for the offense, that's what this offense has kind of needed during this winning streak, is more opportunities to say, it's obviously not preseason football out there, but you need to go out there and like try some stuff. You need to be able to fail forward a little bit if you're this offense. So I think it is a fair assessment of the team to kind of think like, man, they're doing so many things wrong. But I do think that, I mean, for whether or not they're for real, that may be another question for like a month from now to find out. I think their defense is for real. I feel much more confident about the defense. The offense, though, is the offense going to be able to be dynamic enough to get to the point where you're in the playoff? They're in the playoff discussion, but in the picture, they're outside the picture right now. If you can't get in, is it going to be because you don't have a more dynamic passing attack offensively? And I think that could be the case. So in ways, the jury is very much still out, but in other ways, like defensively, running the ball, the offensive line, run blocking, like that stuff is for real. And it kind of makes you wonder, is that the mark of a great playoff team? Being able to rush the quarterback, being able to create turnovers, being able to run the football, especially as the season progresses. And I just think they're responding to Sean Payton and what he wanted to instill with this team culture wise and what he's coaching them up to do. Are they for real? I think we're still in a TBD kind of situation there.
So, looking ahead to Sunday's game, what do you think are some of the keys that will that will decide this game? If I can get over my own tongue here, what do you think will be some of the keys to Sunday's game?
Well, we know Brian Flores brings 6 or more rushers more than any other defensive coordinator in the NFL right now, and I think that is going to be a huge test for the Broncos because not that they've struggled all the time with the blitz this year, but do you have enough blitz beaters, and how is Sean Payton going to play that chess match, right? Because he's got some really good pass catching backs. The Broncos have been tremendous this season off of play action, so I think it's going to be how early can you establish the run offensively and kind of keep the Vikings defense on their heels versus you letting them dictate the pace of the game by not picking up assignments and missing those opportunities to pick up key third downs early in the game. So I think that's going to be dictated very early on in this game. That's a huge key to me, but also I've talked about this almost every single week. The Broncos face a lot of quarterbacks that can be dangerous threats with their legs. Josh Dobbs, certainly in that category. They've been consistently good at limiting the opportunities that quarterbacks have when running the ball and creating a secondary pass rush, if you will, to where, hey, the initial guys are kind of forcing him off his spot, but the secondary guys are coming in and making him make a quick decision with the ball. And he's just off with the timing, or he's just off with the accuracy, or he's not able to quite get into the open field and convert those third downs where, and he might have had a wide open running lane, but then the spy is coming in and shutting it down. So that has to continue to be efficient for the Broncos, is that initial rush getting home off the edge, but then also your secondary rush. Can those guys make it hard for Josh Dobbs to play kind of that, not that he plays backyard football in a way, but when he gets off script and when he gets off his spot, he's able to beat teams with his legs. And I think, can the Broncos limit that in this game? Those are two major keys that I think to the Broncos winning, of course. I mean, for the Vikings, it's obviously going to be a lot of different factors.
Yeah, and I think the biggest one for the Vikings is, can they get this running game going? I mean, we did talk about how this is a better Broncos defense. They've shown some improvement. They still have issues against the run though, because I think Buffalo had what was it, 170 yards rushing on Monday
Mhm.
night, while James Cook was trying out for the and one mixtape tour, going between the legs and everything else. You know,
Yeah.
Alexander Madison hasn't been great for the Vikings this year. Ty Chandler, he's not great. Like I'm gonna throw that out there right now. Some people kind of just started getting all happy on X because I said I don't think Ty Chandler's good, guys. Like, what do you mean he's better than Madison? And I'm like, yeah, but your bar is very low. Alexander Madison is one of the worst running backs in the league. And this defense allowing 5.6 yards per carry. I should have did the math without that 350-yard rushing game by Miami, because that's probably a more accurate indicator of their defense. But the rush defense, I think that's going to be a big key for the Vikings, as well as the penalty battle. I mean, the Vikings are first in the NFL with 76 penalties. The Broncos are third with 67 penalties. And I think it's going to be very important to keep Denver behind the sticks. That Athletic article that I was pointing out, and my apologies, I didn't put the name in my outline, so I don't have that off the top of my head, but it mentioned that Denver has a 21.6% conversion rate on third down of 7 yards or more. When it's 7 yards or less, the Broncos have a 56.7% mark at less than 7 yards. And not only is that important, but the Vikings defense has also struggled on first down, because they're allowing a 43.6% conversion rate. So, I mean, I think keeping the Broncos behind the sticks, utilizing that running game to at least have it be functional. The Vikings aren't like the, 2020 Vikings, where Mike Zimmer was running Dalvin Cook in the middle of the line 40 times and wanting to get, like, it's just got to be effective. Like 4 or 5 yards a carry, open up that playbook, and then you can test that Broncos pass defense that has some good pieces, but also is going up against a lot of top tier weapons, and could get one more if Justin Jefferson returns on Sunday night.
Which would be a very intriguing matchup between he and Pat Surtain, who's kind of been following around top receivers for the other team the last handful of weeks. And that would be some must-see TV right there. I can't remember if they played it once or twice back when Jefferson was at LSU, but I'm sure they're familiar with each other. So that would be a fun matchup to be able to watch. And then how do the Broncos then cover Jordan Addison, right? And who do they put on him, and how do they, roll the safeties and things like that. So the third down conversion rate is a big thing, because like you said, the Broncos are not good when it's 3rd and 7 and beyond. And they had a lot of those against Buffalo. I think they were averaging almost a 3rd and 10 or 3rd and 12, something. It was crazy how behind the sticks they were getting. And that's such a huge point to make, because we know that, man, Russell Wilson, this offense, they can work off play action when they have the defense guessing. And when it is 3rd and short, that's huge. And then on the other side of things, hey, how is Chris Cooper? And that, Broncos fans love Chris Cooper. And I don't know how much they love Dalton Reisner, though, for the Vikings, but how much is that protection going to hold up in terms of the Broncos sending guys? And is Vance Joseph going to be aggressive against a quarterback that maybe you have an opportunity to be a little more aggressive with, since he's not consistently just spreading the ball around, throwing it 45 times a game, although he probably could if asked to do so? How aggressive are they going to be on the other side to try to limit the amount that he's able to spread the ball to those weapons in the passing game and kind of force them to run it a little bit more?
All right. So we're heading towards the end of the show. I got to get your prediction. What do you think is the prediction for Sunday night's game between the Vikings and Broncos?
I've got the Broncos by a field goal. Playing at home, they're riding this winning streak. They're riding the strong play of their defense. I like the way that they're playing right now. I know it's not perfect like everybody wants it to be, but I think that definitely we're seeing a much better team. Sean Payton's got these guys believing. The Broncos are healthy for the most part in key areas, and I think that's crucial. And just riding this momentum. This is a team that over the last 8 years, I mean, they have not won a lot. So they're kind of, a lot of these guys catching that winning feeling for the first time, but playing in front of the home fans, I think they understand what's at stake to get back to 500. I think the Broncos by a field goal in this game sounds about right to me.
My prediction for every Vikings game is pain, like Clubber Lang and Rocky 2 or whatever it was. So, I mean, I kind of have to go that way. But my overall prediction, I mean, it's hard to pick against the Vikings right now. The vibes are immaculate, as the kids say. Everybody's loving Josh Dobbs. They're shaving their eyebrows. They're blasting Creed. Justin Jefferson said the only Creed he's ever heard was like the movie. So like this whole
Okay.
group is getting, I'm more of an Alter Bridge guy myself, but I mean, that's beside the point right now. I'm going to go Vikings 24, Broncos 17. I think the running game gets going, especially if Ty Chandler is that lead back. I think he makes the Broncos pay on 1 or 2 plays. And I think that I'm kind of wondering if Jefferson plays, because I look at that and it would be fun. It would be awesome. Why would you have him come back against Pat Surtain in a game that you theoretically could win without him? And then maybe, okay, let's bring him back against the Bears. If we start beating the tar out of the Bears, we can at least pull him back, have him rest through the bye. I feel like they're going to take the cautious approach with him, but the Vikings have enough fireworks, and I think the Broncos don't have enough firepower offensively to take advantage of Brian Flores' defense. So I'm going to say Vikings 24, Broncos 17.
I could see it. I mean, hey, you never know. It's any given Sunday in the NFL, right? And like I said, somebody's streak is coming to an end this weekend. I mean, one of these two teams is going to have to go back to the drawing board and kind of reevaluate. And I think it's going to make for fascinating must see TV, right? I mean, it's these two teams have played some really good games through the years. I was there for the Tebow game back in 2011, and I'll never forget the Teddy Bridgewater game in 2015. The way that game was just tight to the very end, and Stephon Diggs just dominating the no-fly zone. And I think that was his rookie year. So
That was
these
his
two teams,
breakout game. Yeah.
that was,
Sorry
yeah,
to
and
interrupt
it
you.
was
Yeah.
no, that you're right. It was his breakout game, and I think he was hurt up until that point or something. So it was just, man, it was. It's been crazy matchups with these two teams through the years. Very fun, and I'm looking forward to it for sure.
So what's going on at Predominantly Orange and the Locked On Broncos podcast right now?
Just a lot of kind of trying to capture this excitement, right? Obviously, we haven't done a ton of winning. We've been doing a lot more of the mock drafts this time of year, a lot more of who could be the next head coach around this time of year. And now it's like, man, we might actually have a team here. So responding and reacting and writing all about that, talking all about that. So it's been a lot of fun. Obviously, I've been fortunate to cover a couple of Super Bowls, so I'm not going to complain too much here about the last 8 years. But I mean, it's been a bit of a grind going through a lot of these different coaching searches and stuff. So it's nice to be on the other side of that for a change. So a lot of good things going on over at Predominantly Orange and Locked On Broncos.
And if people want to learn more about the Broncos, you got it on screen for the YouTube audience, but for everybody listening on Apple and Spotify, where can they follow you on social media?
Yeah, you can always find me on X or Twitter, whatever you call it. I still call it Twitter. It's never gonna, I don't think
Yeah.
that's ever gonna go away. But at Sayre Bedinger on there, and always appreciative of people jumping in the mentions and talking football. It's a blast. I've got to meet a lot of people that I met on Twitter initially in real life now. So kind of fun how that works out. But yeah, you can always find me on Twitter. But that's pretty much it these days, to be honest with you.
Yeah, there's a lot. Maybe this is my old man yells at cloud energy, but there's a lot to handle. There's
Yes.
X, there's Blue Sky, there's Instagram, there's TikTok. The talk, man, everybody loves the talk. The kids love it too. But you know how it goes. But thank you for coming on, Sayre. We appreciate your time, and we'll have you on again soon.
Appreciate it.
And that is all the time we have for the Viking Age podcast today. We do this every Monday, and a late week episode for you guys right here on the Viking Age YouTube channel. We're also on Apple and Spotify the very next day, but however you consume us, don't forget to rate, comment, share, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode, and we can send the word to the message. For Sayre Bedinger, I am Schad, and this has been the Viking Age podcast.